And our first guest this morning is Brent Gill. And Brent is an author, and he's going to show us his books. Brent,
Good morning.
Glad you're here.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, it's a pleasure to be back. I came when I first published Fire on Black Mountain, and we talked a little bit about the story behind the story on Black Mountain. And subsequently, I have written a second book called Snow on Black Mountain. And the Black Mountain is the key to the whole thing, because on the face of Black Mountain in this book right here, my house is sitting right about in this area. So I'm looking right at this out my front door.
Wow.
Not the pack horses and the rock here, but that whole mountain. When I was born in 1944, and my took me home to the same hilltop that I happen to live on today, and I am just about 2 or 3 miles south of Springville, which is up in the foothills of Tulare County, east of Porterville and southeast of Visalia. So yeah, I had a little ride to get here this morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you anytime. Come anytime you can.
All right. My father was a cattleman. I was raised on a working cow-calf cattle ranch, and I spent my days as a young person and older working on the ranch. Summers were not necessarily for going to the beach or getting together with my friends and goofing off, but my job was to go with my dad on horseback or with my brother, and we would work cattle or do whatever we did on a ranch. And at the age of 12, my father came into my room one night about 1:30 in the morning, and he said, "Brent, I need you to get up. We've had a call from the Forest Service. There has been a lightning strike on the side of Black Mountain, and there is a fire smoldering up there. We have been asked to get some firefighters to the top of the mountain to put out this fire before it gets away, because the majority of the Forest Service folks from Springville are all up north somewhere fighting the big fires up there, and we don't have anybody. And boy, if they don't get up there on top of this mountain before the sun comes up and dries out what little rain we've had, if they don't get up there, we're liable to have more fire than we can handle. So we've got to get out of bed and get going and get this happening." Now, I went with my dad. I followed him. It was a very, very interesting trip. It was kind of exciting as a 12-year-old, for crying out loud. I was 12 years old. We get out of bed in the middle of the night and go up the side of the dark mountain. Now, the thing that made this even more interesting was that it was a moonless night. The moon hadn't come up yet. And with the rain that we had had, the little bit of thing that came in from the Mexico, the clouds and stuff, it meant that we had a very, very little light, because even the stars were a little bit sheltered. So as we rode up that mountain on horseback, it was dark, and these firefighters were not horsemen. They were firefighters, and they weren't real crazy about the horses, and the horses, they were a little nervous about going into the dark, and it was kind of a fun time. But I had an interesting trip following my father. Well, let's move the clock ahead 60 years and say, all right, now you've decided you want to write a book. There was no other book but the story of Fire on Black Mountain. And of course, if just told the story of me following my dad, it would have not been a very exciting story. It was just kind of a getting something done thing. So in my book, I created a character, Billy Scott, and his father, Bob Scott, has had a bad fall with his horse and broken his leg in 3 places. And so Bob Scott can't ride, and the Forest Service has called him, and he says, well, Brent could probably or Billy can take them up the mountain. And so the Forest Service says, well, we got to get him up there, send him up. So in my book, Billy catches the horses, leads them up there, meets the firefighters, and does the job taking them up the mountain.
Wow.
And of course, you know, a 12-year-old with a bunch of adults, you got to get into all kinds of problems. And part of the concept of weaving a good story is to get the character into problems and get him out. And I do that in several different ways with this. And he has problems with one of the firefighters that walks around the back of the truck. And here stands Billy in vest and hat and heavy jacket and chaps and spurs. You know, I mean, he's a working cowboy. This is the way he shows up. And the firefighter comes around the corner and takes one look at him and said, "Oh my, a baby cowboy." And needless to say, Billy was not very thrilled by being called a baby cowboy. So that was kind of the story behind Fire on Black Mountain, and what came of it and how it started. I published this book back in December of 18. It came online on Amazon. And by the way, both of these books are available on Amazon. Look up my name, Brent Gill, and in the little search box, and it'll bring up both of these books and a couple of other things. So you can buy these on Amazon, and you can get information on them there. I also sell them. I of course I go around and see people, and I sell a book or two, you know. So, but one of the things that I've done is I go to the service clubs, and almost all service clubs are looking for a program, and I can put on anywhere from a 15 to a 30-minute program, kind of depending on what their time frame
that's
is.
what I should be doing.
And you know, I get to talk to them and sell them the books and tell them the story behind the book, particularly on Fire on Black Mountain. And part of the reason that I wrote a book was that I have been a columnist for the Porterville Recorder for several years, and I write about, started writing about the history of Springville and our general area. The column is called Daunt to Dillonwood. Daunt was the name of the first people who had a little business, a hotel, and they even had a post office there, and they served food and one thing. And this was on pretty much right at the Springville Rodeo grounds, pretty much on the southwestern end of town. And Dillonwood, Nathan Dillon, one of the old timers there, owned a big grove of redwood trees, and it's up at the very headwaters of the North Fork of the Tule River. So Daunt to Dillonwood pretty much covers the whole area there, and that's been the column. One of the things that I have written about are the animals, and I started writing about them. And one of them is a bull that has an amazing personality. Mr. Boo was a bottle baby. He was born up in the I can see the name and I can't say it anyway. Way up north, towards Reading area. Not almost there. Anyway. And he was raised as a bottle baby. His mama died giving birth, and they took him in the house and fed him a bottle, and he was raised in a box by a wood stove. And when I had a need for a herd sire, I found this ad on the internet and went up, and we bought this little guy, and he was about a 3-year-old, maybe 4 when we brought him home. And but she told me, she said, now he likes to give kisses. And the picture that you saw there a few seconds ago of Mr. Boo, and if you look very, very carefully, his tongue is very gently rubbing my chin, and he's kind of quit giving kisses on the cheek, but he will still give me a kiss on the hand once in a while when I go out and pet him. But he's very, very gentle and very quiet.
He's beautiful.
Yeah, and he has a tremendous personality. He's always doing something to get in trouble. So I write about him and that stuff. Once this book was published, I realized that, you know, some of the adventures that I'd had, some of the things that I'd done as a rancher's son, would maybe lend themselves to Billy Scott, because Billy Scott was raised on a ranch. Billy Scott is me, of course, and so I looked at the idea of maybe I could create a sequel to Fire on Black Mountain and talk a little bit about some of the things that I did and utilize those in another story. Now, Fire on Black Mountain is basically a retelling in different form of something that actually happened to me. Snow on Black Mountain is all pretty much made up information.
Yeah.
Yet every scene, every picture, every image in both books are things that I have seen, done, been a part of, ridden through, driven through, been at, whatever, you know.
And you can't make mistakes when you're done.
There you go. So I decided that Billy needed to have another adventure. And his father calls him in, and he'd gone back to school after the end of the trip involved in Fire on Black Mountain. And so he calls him in one morning, and they come to breakfast, and Dad's leg still isn't getting along very good. He had to have surgery on it. It wasn't healing right, et cetera, et cetera. So he says, Billy, you know, I'm going to have to pull you out of school for a few days. We have 50 head of cows and calves still on top of Black Mountain, but there's a huge snowstorm coming in. Looks like it's going to be here Sunday night. I need to get you up there and get those cattle gathered. They're going to be ready to go home. Probably be a quick trip up. You'll be up there a day or two, bring them all back and bring them down into the foothills where it'll rain on them and not snow on them, and they won't get trapped, and we won't lose calves and cows to the snow. So that became the reason for going to Snow on Black Mountain. And of course, if Billy goes back, he gets into all kinds of problems, and he and his horse Rowdy have a terrible time. Now, in Fire on Black Mountain, his dad said, now, Billy, you've been riding Jasper. I know he's kind of an old plug, but you've been doing pretty good. You're getting to be a pretty good cowboy. I want you to ride my horse Rowdy. Well, Mother has a conniption fit because she said, well, that's the horse that fell with you. You're going to let our child ride that horse? He said, it wasn't the horse's fault. It was slick ground, and he doesn't have any slick ground on this trip. So he lets him ride that. And, of course, as is typical with animals and kids, a lot of times they connected, and Rowdy and Billy become a real pair. And so when he goes back, and at the end of the book, I'll give away just a tiny bit. Billy gets to keep Rowdy, so he gets to ride him from then on. And Dad says, well, I'm going to need to have a different horse anyway. I'm going to have to break a new horse, and I'm going to be a while before I can ride. You need to ride Rowdy. And he also knew that with Billy riding Rowdy, he was going to be able to do a lot of the cattle work and things that he wasn't going to be able to ride and do. So there was a method to his madness. But in Snow on Black Mountain, he and Rowdy go back to the mountain, and they get into all kinds of problems. And of course, Rowdy saves his bacon a couple of times, and it's an interesting story. It's a fun story, and I've had a couple of really neat experiences reading to 4th and 5th graders. Yesterday, in fact, I went to a small school south of Porterville called Hope, and I read one of the chapters in Snow on Black Mountain to them. A friend of mine had been reading. She's already read all of Fire on Black Mountain to them, and she was well through. She'd read chapter 9, and so I read chapter 10 yesterday. But I was able to go in and talk to the kids, and they thought it was pretty cool to meet the author. I got a chance to go to the coast over to Arroyo Grande, and I was able to talk to some of the kids over there. 2 different schools in the Arroyo Grande area gave me an opportunity to do a 30-minute assembly twice, 2 different times. And I had 3, 4, 5, and 6th graders at both of these schools. One of them asked permission to bring 2nd graders, and I said, well, gee, I don't know if they'll behave. And it was really kind of fun because the kids were, because I walk and move, and I've been a classroom teacher, and so one of the things you do is you move constantly. You don't stand still. You keep moving, and then they have to kind of keep watching you. keep up with you. But it was kind of fun because I'd look down at these little second graders and their mouths are open. And the only one that wasn't interested, and he was funny, was a little guy that kept pulling his sweatshirt over his head and take his sleeve and hold it out and peer through his sleeve like a telescope. And we all kind of got the giggles.
That's a new one.
Yeah, that was kind of my opinion. It was kind of a giggle. But anyway, both books are available on the Amazon. The hallmark of both of these books is that they are wholesome stories. They're stories with no sex, no violence, no swearing.
Good.
I write around.
Good deal.
I even write around things like "oh darn." I mean, it's easy enough to do. You just write around it. You don't say things. And it's not that I'm such a prude, but if you want to buy a book and give it to a child, you don't really want the mother or the dad calling you up and saying, "What did you give my kid?"
Gosh, no.
You know?
Gosh.
And so the Billy is a good kid. He probably has more success than he deserves in some ways, but there's always a little bit of Walter Mitty-ish in all of us who write books of this nature.
Right, and I'm so glad that you came in and told us about them.
Thank
because
you. Well,
there's something that people would really they'd have to enjoy them. They're just good. It's good.
Well, I have many reviews up on Amazon. In fact, I have 25 reviews for Fire on Black Mountain. I've only got 3 on Snow because people are kind of a little slower getting to that one, but nonetheless positive. And I'm finding that adults like reading these kinds of stories. Most of us remember the old Nancy Drew Hardy Boy series. This is a similar constructed story. They're different, because we're talking about life on a horseback or life on a mountain or with cattle. But it's the same idea. They get into problems and work themselves out.
Oh, thank you so much for coming and telling us about
Thank
this.
you. Thank you very
And if you do
much.
a third one, come back.
I will.
Come
I
back
will.
anyway.
There you go. No, I will. It's been a real pleasure having these. I enjoy going out to the service clubs. I've contacted a lot of service clubs, and you have an email address for me. If you're interested in getting in touch, I'd be more than glad to talk to you. And I come out and show the books and talk a lot about what we just talked about and kind of tell the story of the story.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
And I'll see you the next time.
Okay, I'll be here.
We'll be right back.